What if we were never here, and what we're experiencing is a dream? Part of the Thinking Library. The What If Series, Volume 6. Introduction. Are you sure you're here? Right now you're here. You can feel it. The weight of your body, the rhythm of your breath, the quiet presence of your thoughts moving in the background. Everything around you feels stable. The space you're in, the sense of time moving forward, one moment into the next. There's a kind of unspoken certainty in all of this. You don't usually question whether you're here. You just are. And that feeling is so natural, so immediate, that it almost seems unquestionable. But pause for a second. Not to doubt everything, just to look a little closer. Because there's something interesting about experience. It doesn't come with proof. It comes with conviction. Think about a dream. Not a vague one, but a vivid one. The kind where everything feels real while you're inside it. You walk. You speak. You react. You don't stop to ask if it's real. You live it. And while it's happening, there's no distance between you and the experience. It feels exactly like this moment. Only later, after you wake up, do you realize, that wasn't what I thought it was. But while you were in it, there was no sign, no warning, no signal that said, this isn't real. Now just sit with that for a moment. Because if a dream can feel completely real while you're inside it, then the feeling of this is real might not be as reliable as it seems. And that brings us to a quiet, uncomfortable question. Not one you have to answer immediately, just one to hold for a moment. What if this feels real? For the same reason a dream feels real? What if the sense of being here is something being generated rather than confirmed? And take it one step further. What if you were never actually here? Not in the way you assume? What if this, everything you're experiencing right now, is something unfolding from somewhere you can't currently see? That doesn't mean it's meaningless. It doesn't mean it's false in a simple way. It just means it might not be what it appears to be. Because the strangest part of all this is not that reality could be a dream. It's that if it were, you would feel exactly like you do right now. Certain, present, real, and you wouldn't know the difference. So instead of asking whether this is real, maybe the more interesting question is, how do you know you're actually here? And if you can't answer that with complete certainty, then where exactly are you? Chapter 1. The certainty that isn't proven. We live with a quiet assumption that what we see is real, that what we feel is reliable, that the world around us exists exactly as it appears. It's not something we prove. It's something we accept, because everything in our experience seems to support it. You touch something, it feels solid. You look around, the world stays consistent. You remember yesterday, and it connects smoothly to today. So naturally, you trust it. But here's the question most of us never stop to ask. What if that certainty isn't actually proven? Not wrong, not fake, just unverified. Because if you look closely, everything you know about reality comes through one channel. Experience. You don't access the world directly. You experience sensations. You interpret signals. You build a picture of reality inside your mind. And that picture feels so convincing that you rarely question it. But there are moments, small ones, where that confidence cracks. A dream that felt completely real until you woke up. A memory you were sure about that turned out to be wrong. An illusion that tricked your eyes, even when you knew it was an illusion. These aren't rare glitches. They're reminders. Reminders that what feels real can still be constructed. This is where the question becomes sharper. If your senses can be mistaken, and your mind can create entire experiences that feel real, then how do you know this right now isn't happening in a similar way? This is the tension that René Descartes found himself in. He wasn't trying to deny reality. He was trying to find something that couldn't be doubted. So he began stripping everything away. The external world could be an illusion. The body could be misperceived. Even mathematics could be manipulated. He questioned everything, and what he discovered was unsettling. There was no clear way to prove that what he was experiencing was truly real in the way he assumed. But there was one thing he couldn't remove: the fact that something was experiencing. Even if everything else was uncertain, the experience itself remained. Not the world, not the story, not the identity, just the undeniable presence of awareness. And that changes the ground beneath the question. Because now, instead of saying, "I know I am here," you're left with something quieter, but more precise. Something is aware of this. That may sound like a small difference, but it shifts everything. Because here becomes unclear. The body you feel might be part of the experience. The world you see might be part of the experience. Even the sense of being a separate you might be part of the experience. But the awareness itself, that remains. So maybe the real certainty isn't that you are here. Maybe the only certainty is this: something is happening. Something is being experienced. And whatever this is, it feels completely real from the inside. Chapter 2. The Dream That Doesn't End. If the only thing you can't doubt is that something is being experienced, then the next question becomes unavoidable. What kind of experience is this? Because it doesn't behave like a typical dream. At least, not the kind you're used to. Most dreams are unstable. They flicker. They shift without warning. Scenes change abruptly. Logic breaks. Time bends. You might be in one place, and then suddenly somewhere else. You might speak to someone, and they become someone entirely different. There's a looseness to it, a lack of structure. But this, what you're in right now, feels nothing like that. There's continuity. You wake up in the same world you left. You recognize people. You remember what happened yesterday. Cause leads to effect in ways you can predict. If you drop something, it falls. If you make a decision, it carries consequences. There's a kind of order here, a consistency that holds everything together. And that consistency is what convinces you this is real. But what if consistency doesn't prove reality? What if it only proves stability? Think about it this way. A dream doesn't have to be chaotic. It just has to be convincing. And the more stable it is, the less likely you are to question it. So imagine a dream that doesn't collapse when you look at it. A dream that maintains memory. A dream that follows rules. A dream that learns how to keep itself coherent. From the inside. How would you tell the difference? Because what you call the real world might simply be an experience that doesn't break. You don't question it. Not because you've proven it's real, but because it holds together every time you interact with it. And over time, that reliability becomes belief. You stop asking if it's real. You start assuming it is. But assumption isn't proof. It's familiarity. And familiarity is powerful. It creates comfort. It builds trust. It removes the need to question until a thought like this appears. What if this is not reality in the ultimate sense, but a sustained experience that behaves like one? Not random, not fragile, but structured, maintained, almost as if something is ensuring that it remains believable. Because the more consistent the experience, the deeper you settle into it, the less distance you feel between yourself and what's happening. And eventually, you stop seeing it as an experience at all. You see it as the world. But step back for a moment. Not to reject it, just to look differently. Everything you've ever known has appeared through experience. And that experience has never shown you what's beyond it. It has only shown you itself. So if this is a dream, it's not one that fades when you question it. It's one that stays, one that responds, one that continues no matter how closely you look. And that raises a deeper possibility. Maybe the difference between a dream and reality is not what it is, but how stable it appears to be. Chapter 3. Who is the dreamer? If this is a dream, and it's this stable, this consistent, this convincing, then the question begins to turn. Not just what is this, but something more personal. Who is behind it? Because every dream, at least the ones you know, has a source. Even if you don't see it, even if you don't control it, it's still happening somewhere. So where is this happening? And more importantly, who is the dreamer? At first, the most natural answer is you. That this entire experience, your life, your world, everything you see, is unfolding within your own mind at some deeper level. It's an idea that feels both powerful and unsettling. Because if that's true, then who you think you are right now is not the full picture. This version of you, the one with a name, a history, a body, would be more like a character, a perspective, a role being played inside something much larger. And yet, it doesn't feel like that. You don't feel like you're generating the world around you. You don't decide what happens next. You don't control other people. You don't script the events of your life. Things surprise you. Things happen outside your expectations. So if you are the dreamer, you are not fully aware of it. And that creates tension, because it means the mind generating the experience and the mind experiencing it may not be the same layer. But there's another possibility. What if you are not the dreamer? What if this is unfolding within something else? Something you are part of, but not identical to? In that case, your identity becomes even more uncertain, because then who you are is not the source of the experience. You are within it, participating in it, like a character inside a story that didn't begin with you and won't end with you. And yet, there's a third possibility, quieter, harder to grasp. What if there is no separate dreamer at all? What if the dream is not being created by something, but is simply happening? Not owned, not directed, just unfolding. In that case, the question, who is dreaming, may not have a clear answer, because the dream and the dreamer would not be separate things. They would be the same process, and you would not be outside of it. You would be one of the ways it experiences itself. Now pause here, because none of these answers fully settle the question. Each one opens something and removes something else. If you are the dreamer, your identity expands, but your control becomes uncertain. If something else is dreaming, you exist, but not as the source. If there is only the dream, you are neither separate nor central, just part of what is happening. And maybe that's the point, not to land on one answer, but to see how unstable the question really is. Because the moment you ask, who is the dreamer? You begin to realize you may not know who or what you are within this experience at all. Chapter 4. Why it feels so real. By now, something subtle has shifted, not in the world around you, but in how certain it feels. Because once you begin to question whether this is a dream, and who or what might be behind it, another question quietly emerges. Why does it feel so real? Not just believable, but solid, immediate, personal. Because even if you entertain all of this, even if you allow the possibility, you still feel like you. You still feel located inside a body, looking out at a world that exists beyond you. That feeling doesn't disappear. And that's exactly what makes this so convincing. But look a little closer at how that feeling is built. Everything you experience comes through your senses. Sight, sound, touch, signals arriving, being processed, interpreted. You don't experience the world directly. You experience a version of it, a constructed model that feels seamless. You see objects, but what you're really seeing is your mind interpreting patterns of light. You hear voices, but what you're really hearing is vibration translated into meaning. It all feels immediate, but it's happening through layers. And those layers are so refined that they vanish from awareness. You don't see the process. You only see the result. So the world feels direct, unquestionable. But what you're actually inside of is an experience that has been assembled, a kind of interface, a way of navigating something deeper without needing to fully perceive it. And that interface has one essential feature. It creates a center, a point of view, a location that feels like me. Everything is organized around it. Your thoughts feel like your thoughts. Your body feels like your body. Your perspective feels like the only one you truly have. And because of that, everything else feels separate. Out there, not you. But that separation might not be fundamental. It might be structural. Because without a center, there would be no perspective, no orientation, no way to move through experience. So the system generates a stable identity, a continuous story, a boundary that says, this is you, and that is not. And it reinforces it constantly, through memory, through language, through emotion. Every experience you've had is linked together, forming a narrative that feels consistent over time. I was there. I did that. This is who I am. And that story becomes your anchor. It keeps you grounded in a single viewpoint. So even if everything around you were part of a dream, you would still feel like a separate self within it. Because the experience is structured that way, not necessarily to deceive you, but to allow you to function within it, to act, to choose, to respond. And over time, that structure becomes so familiar that you stop seeing it as a structure at all. You see it as reality. But maybe what feels most real is not the world itself, but the way your experience of it holds together. So the question is no longer just, is this a dream? But something more precise. If this is a constructed experience, how much of what you call you is part of that construction too? Chapter 5. Waking Up or Waking Within. If what you experience feels real because it holds together, and if your sense of self is part of that construction, then a new question begins to form. Not about the world, not about the dream, but about you. What exactly are you in all of this? Because up to this point, you've been assuming something quietly, that you are the person inside the experience, the one thinking, choosing, reacting, the one moving through time. But if this is a dream, and if your identity is part of the experience itself, then that version of you might not be the full story. It might be something being experienced, not the source of experience. Just like in a dream. When you're dreaming, you have a body. You have a role. You move through events as if they're happening to you. But the character in the dream is not the one creating the dream. It's the one living inside it. So now the question becomes sharper. Are you the character? Or are you something else? Because there is something you can notice right now. Not by thinking, but by observing. Thoughts are appearing. You don't choose most of them. They arise, and then they pass. Emotions come and go. Sensations change. Even your sense of identity shifts depending on context. But something remains constant. Something is aware of all of it. Aware of the thoughts. Aware of the feelings. Aware of the body. And that awareness doesn't seem to come and go in the same way. It's just there. Quiet. Unmoving. Present. So maybe what you are is not the character moving through the experience, but the awareness within which the character appears. Not the role, but the space in which the role is played. And if that's true, then the idea of being here changes completely. Because awareness is not located in the same way a body is. It doesn't have edges. It doesn't have a fixed position. It doesn't move through space in the way objects do. Everything appears within it. So instead of saying, I am here, inside this world, it might be closer to say, this experience is appearing within awareness. That may sound subtle, but it turns the entire structure inside out. Because now, the world is not something you are inside of. It's something showing up in what you are. And if this is a dream, then awareness might be the closest thing to the waking layer. Not something you need to reach, but something that has been present the entire time, quietly observing, unchanged by whatever appears. So the question shifts again. Not how do I wake up, but what if the part of you that is aware was never asleep to begin with? And if that's the case, then maybe you were never fully inside the dream, in the way you thought. Conclusion: if you were never here. So we return to the question, what if you were never here? Not as a conclusion, but as something to sit with. Because after everything we've explored, one thing has become clear. You can't say with absolute certainty what this is. You can't fully prove that this is reality in the way it appears. And you can't fully prove that it's a dream. But you can say this: something is being experienced right now. And whatever this is, it feels real from the inside. The world hasn't disappeared. Your life hasn't dissolved. The people around you are still here. But something has changed. Not outside, but in how tightly you hold it. Because maybe the point was never to replace one belief with another. Not to say, this is real, or this is a dream. But to loosen the certainty that you fully understand what's happening. And in that space, something unexpected appears. Freedom. Not the kind that removes responsibility. Not the kind that ignores consequence. But the kind that comes from realizing you are participating in something. Not controlling it completely. Not fully defined by it either. Because if this is a dream, then every moment is something you are experiencing, not owning. And if it's real, then every moment is still something you are experiencing. Either way, your life is not something you can hold on to permanently. It's something you move through, something you feel, something that unfolds. So the question slowly changes from, is this real? To something quieter. How do I live inside this? Because whether this is a dream or not, pain still feels like pain. Joy still feels like joy. Connection still feels meaningful. The experience doesn't lose its weight, just because its nature is uncertain. If anything, that uncertainty makes it more immediate, more alive, because nothing is guaranteed beyond what is happening now. And maybe that's the closest thing to waking up. Not leaving the experience, but seeing it clearly enough that you're no longer completely lost inside it. You still play your role. You still move through your life. But there's a quiet awareness in the background that this might be something you don't fully understand. And that's okay, because you don't need complete certainty to live fully. You don't need to solve the nature of reality, to care, to act, to choose. So maybe you were never here, in the way you assumed. Or maybe you are here, just not in the way you think. Either way, this moment is happening, and you are aware of it. And perhaps that's enough. So instead of trying to wake up from the dream, maybe the real question is, if this is a dream, what kind of life will you choose to live inside it?